Hello. I can change the name.
Hello.
Hey,
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first PeerDAS breakout room. So thank you for joining at this challenging time. Yeah, where is our King Dab Lion? Okay, yeah, so we have a agenda on the GitHub, and just a few seconds ago I just created this meeting notes and hope people can help to collaborate on the document. You should have access. So I listed the basic agenda of like client updates and spec discussion and next steps. But if you have some more items you want to discuss, feel free to bring it up here or on the agenda. So I think I'm here to moderate because of the spec. I want to make sure that the specs can reflect what is the current implementation status, but I don't necessarily have to be the moderator here. And I think you guys did a great job in the interrupt and have more information and knowledge of what is the current status. So does anyone want to share the client updates after the interrupt?
Hello. Hi, this is Jimmy. I can share some updates on the Lighthouse side. Can you guys all hear me?
Yes.
Great. Yeah. So after interrupt, we've got a few things that we've changed, including making the PeerDAS network parameters configurable now, so we can configure the DAS parameters like number of samples and custody requirement. Those kind of variable can be configurable at runtime. So we no longer need to rebuild it. The one thing that we haven't made it configurable is the blob count, but I think that's probably something we can work on once we decide what we're going to do with increasing blob count in either Electro or the PeerDAS fork. And then on that, we've Deadlines made a couple of good custody lookup improvements in Lighthouse, including batching the request and load balancing request to peers, and also prioritize peers based on the success rate. So there's a few improvement in lookup. And then also we've worked on storage efficiency improvements. But I think mostly we've just been working on making it more resilient based on the feedback that we got from Interop. But now that we've most recently been focused on our current release, we're looking to get back to PeerDAS again soon. That's it from the Lighthouse side.
Yeah, I can go next. So for the Prism side, we've been slowly starting to productionize our PeerDAS code. So for the interop, we took a lot of shortcuts so that we could get something working. One of the shortcuts was that we reused a lot of our blob methods for data columns. So we're slowly trying to decouple them. We're adding custom column specific, feeds from our database that you can differentiate between blobs and columns. Some of the things that we are looking at are basically on how to reconstruct data effectively. So we've managed to get that working. So Manu has done a lot of work there. Prism now can reconstruct data that is as long as we have 50% of data, we will reconstruct it and broadcast it out to the network. So we're using a time delta approach where instead of reconstructing immediately, we do reconstruct it, but we wait to broadcast it. So in the event that the column does exist in the network, we don't unnecessarily increase the amount of duplicates out there. On another thing that we've been working on is to look at our basically how validator custody would affect how you generate node ID. So maybe Manu can add a comment to that because he's been doing some work on it.
Yep. Let me find the link. I wrote a little document. So basically, on Prism, at each start, we generate a new peer-to-peer private key, which then we derive into public key, then into node ID. It's not totally doable right now because if we continue to do that with PeerDAS, possibly the new private key will generate a totally new node ID, and so a totally new set of subnets. And so at each reboot, we will have to backfill all the columns. So we started to develop a strategy just to try to brute force private key in order to obtain the same subnet IDs we had on the previous restart. And we have something working, but which is totally not compatible with validator custody, because with validator custody, possibly we don't know in advance what are the subnets we will have to custody, because it can change at runtime. And so I wrote a little document I just linked in the chat explaining why we could have some issues about validator custody why validator custody would be not compatible with the fact that we generate a new private key at each beacon node boot. I don't know if other client team also tries to generate a new private key at each boot, or if Prism is the only one to do it.
I may say that Teku is reusing previous private key always.
Teku does generate a new one or not? Sorry, I didn't understand.
No, it doesn't generate a new one.
Okay.
Uses.
Yeah, I guess Prism is the only one to do it.
Yeah, when Lotsa regenerates the new node ID on each restart, but I think we can sort of fix it by saving and rereading the previous ENR that was generated, and only DB wipes should basically generate new ENRs. But I think the reason why we did that was so that, for example, if any nodes are banning a particular ENR for whatever reason, so a restart basically helps you get over it. So those kind of issues might come up where nodes have banned some ENRs and they stop finding peers, because it can happen that, for example, you started something, it had some bug, and then you fixed it, or your EL was down, and basically so for whatever reasons you fixed it, you are back up, but now you can't find peers. So that would be a bit of a problem, I think.
I see.
Manu, I think we have discussed in one of the PRs a little bit this regeneration, and I remember my point there was that if you are generating a new one, but then you are trying to be in the same bucket, basically observing the same columns, you are in a quite unique position. So it doesn't help your anonymity in any way. So if that's the goal, then you are breaking it just by searching for a very similar one, because you will be kind of the only node which has selected the same set of 8 columns out of 128. There are just too many combinations.
Yeah, it was exactly the purpose of it. It was to generate a totally new private key, but which match the same data column subnets. Yes, it was the goal.
Yeah, the thing is that we don't have as many nodes as combinations, I think. So if you are going for the exact same combination of columns, then you will be the only one having that, and then it's quite clear that it's still you. Even if your IP address has changed, you are going back into the same scenario and in the same subset of nodes which is a very small subset because there's only you in it, and you have to that. So it's at the surface you are having a new identifier, but then you are linking it in a way which is easy to correlate through this.
Okay.
That's my feeling.
Interesting. Yes, I see the question. It was for anonymity, totally. Perry and Francesco. Yes. And so we were quite okay to lose a bit of anonymity by brute forcing, but yes, it's not really possible anymore. And as Anton said, yes, we may be in the position where we are the only one to select, to have a different private key and to select the exactly same subnets as well.
Maybe one compromise here could be that I don't know how easy it is in practice to do this, but like as a full node where you only have to custody 4 columns, maybe you can still do this if you don't run any validators. And if you run validators, then it seems to me like you already don't really have any chance of being in any way anonymous. Like there is a clear fingerprint that comes from just you running those same validators. So in that case, I'm not sure that it really matters or like what it adds to do this. So I don't know. Yeah, maybe you can. It might still make sense to keep regenerating it if you don't run any validators. But if you do, then I think it would seems like it kind of clashes with validator custody to try to do this.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yes.
Even if you are not running any validators, you will need to have the consistency because you won't be able to serve peer request and then you will get banned, so you won't find any peers. So it doesn't matter whether you run validators or not, you will have to maintain the custody consistency for whatever node ID you are advertising.
Right, but you can brute force. Like if you're running just a full node with the custody requirement being 4, then it's pretty feasible to brute forces. I think is what you were saying.
Yeah, it is quite easy with so I linked in my document all the computation. So for 32 subnets, yes, there is only, of course, 32 combination possible with one subnet custody and with 100 and with 128 subnets and with 4 minimum custodies, there is about 10 million combinations, which is a lot, but which is still doable as brute force. So yes, for a full node without any validator, it's perfectly doable. But with validator, it's more complicated because you don't know. You have to match more than 4 subnets. And yes, and as Barry said, if you have a validator, I mean, the networks already knows you because you have a validator. So maybe it's not so important to try to get an anonymized peer-to-peer node, peer-to-peer beacon node private key.
By the way, you don't have to do this calculation at startup, right? You can pre-compute the next one.
Yeah. Yeah. Or even pre-compute, let's say a few ones, maybe 10 ones or 16 ones. in
Just
case of rapid restart for any reason.
infinite boot loop. Just be compute an infinite one.
So basically, each beacon node will, for example, now need to support another parameter that says that what are the data columns that you will custody or subnets that you will custody, so that you can generate a node ID that is basically consistent with that custody, or you generate something in the beginning and then you'll have to sort of persist and reread it each time if you want to change your peer ID.
Yeah, but the goal was to generate each at every boot a new private key, and so a new node ID, which is consistent with. Basically, at the first start of the node, we just generate random private key, and so random node ID. We compute all the columns we should custody. We store them in a file, and at the subsequent boot, we just load this file, look at the previously custody columns, column subnets, and then we try to regenerate a new private key corresponding to those subnets. It's quite simple.
So 4 out of 128 is still 100 million combination. No, it's 10 million
10
combinations.
million. Yeah.
So you would be still like the node which has the same combination.
Sure.
Which
Sure.
yeah, I don't know if it's a problem. It's so my question is why are you changing your ID as it has?
Why do we want to change the ID in the first place? That is the question.
Yeah, just what are the reasons for that?
Yeah, it was for anonymity. Yeah, maybe Dishon can have more answer about that.
It's okay. I mean, just you are giving up on that in the sense that it can be uncovered, but it takes some effort to figure out the relation between the two.
Mm-hmm.
Not in the ID. So I need more information on the ID because I need also to know what you are subscribed to. One level more. It just if I know what you are subscribed to, I know that you are the same. Right? Because you are 1 out of 10 million. We will not have 10 million nodes for some time. Every single node will have a unique combination.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry to just recap it. So only Prism and Lodestar generate new node ID at each restart, or other client also do the same thing?
Lodestar, sorry, Lighthouse doesn't regenerate the ID. So we maintain the same node ID.
Got it.
Yeah, Nimbus actually does regenerate node ID. Yeah.
And did you achieve to do it with?
Nope, not yet.
Okay. I can link if you're interested in, I can link my pull request about.
Yeah, that would be nice. Thanks.
It's still in progress. There is not as much stage because maybe we will we won't merge it maybe because of validator custody. But yes, this is my pull request.
Yep, taking a look. Yeah.
One question is how critical is to keep the same custody over a long period of time. If nodes are restarted in production just every couple of months because of, I don't know, software upgrade or something, is it critical to keep the same custody set at that moment, or is it feasible to actually change the custody set and maintain the previous one for some period of time?
I mean, it's fine if like a few people, like a certain percentage of the network changes even all at once. But if, let's say, I don't know, whenever we have a hard fork and everyone upgrades or something like that, everyone changes their custody at the same time, then that's really bad. Like there should always be some like stable kind of part of the network that stays on the same subnets and can like respond to historical queries and just generally, like the subnets shouldn't like fall apart all at once, let's say.
I think if you are changing your custody, then you will have to sort of download the data columns for mini procs to data column of some whatever that period is, and sort of make sure you can custody.
Right, but even for that, you need to make sure that other people are not trying to do the same all at the same time. Like if everyone or like 90% of the network was trying to do this all at once, then it really would be chaos.
Basically, nodes can adopt this strategy on restart. Whenever their PIR is changing, they can basically do this sync of this small window if they want to.
What would maybe work, although that would be huge chaos. So if nodes would know that this is the situation, then they could list. So the gossip sub networks would have to be built, and then nodes could receive things even if it's not their own column. But it would be very chaotic, and I don't know what would trigger that. So yeah, and in general, just there would be a small percentage of nodes which would happen to have some common column in their old set and new set. But otherwise, all the others would just sit on data that there is not on their and column set. I'm kind of thinking whether the mechanism that we have for repair and cross-seeding is slowly solving such a thing as a last resort backup, but it's definitely not ideal.
I feel that it's hard to get the conclusion in this call for this topic. Do people want to keep investing? I mean, in discussing about it, or we move on to, leave it to the offline discussion.
I guess for me, my takeaway is we will discuss it internally, but yes, for full node without any validator, we can try to maintain this shuffling of a private key at start. And for full nodes with validator, I think we will keep always the same private key, but we will discuss it internally with the team.
Thanks, Manu. Okay, let's keep continuing the Kai updates. Any updates from Teku?
To be honest, on my best knowledge, no major things changed since interop. Yeah, probably we'll have draft PR for sampling now. Yeah, probably that's it.
Thank you. And any updates from Nimbus?
So we kind of started working on PeerDAS at Interop. Since then, we have implemented all of the whatever finalized spec is there till now. For in terms of consensus spec tests, we are passing like networking and SSE consensus objects, Merkle dot, all of that stuff. We are also passing all of the KZG spec tests from the NIM side. We have to do some more work in the request response protocol, get data column, sidecar by root, all of that stuff. And yeah, mostly just keeping up with the PR and the spec changes. Yeah, pretty much that. We also have support now for configurable network params, but I think it would be nice if we get like a finalized document or anything from each Panda Ops or yeah, whatever they want to keep configurable. So yeah, that's pretty much up from Nimbus. Yeah.
Barnabas?
I think the general idea is that we keep everything that's in the consensus spec as a spec configurable, and if you don't want to be configurable, then it would be a preset.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
We
Lodestar?
probably need to go through, by the way, each spec value, whether we actually want that to be changeable in the future or not. I think there was some discussion about this in the interop event as well.
Yes. I think it was there like some. I think we've moved some preset into configuration. And is there any other configuration that we should move?
I think there's EIP activation, no, fork epoch right now. And then if we are changing that to PeerDAS activation epoch, that would also be another change that we can.
I see. Yeah. Okay. We will have time to talk about the definitely one configuration. Thank you. Is there anyone from Lodestar here?
One sec, Shaway. I think Jimmy mentioned something in chat. Do you want to bring it up, Jimmy?
Oh yeah. So the max blobs per block is currently a preset. So in Lighthouse we can't configure this at runtime at the moment. So I was wondering if we were to bump this value, maybe we could think about putting it into the config, or is there any thoughts on this?
I think the main issue with moving it to a config is that it also has to be changed on the EL side. I'm not sure if we have any other value that's in the config and arbitrarily changed by the CL that the EL doesn't know about.
What is the actual reason the EL need to know how many blobs there are?
Gas estimation. Otherwise, you can't sync. Also, it needs to know for building the block.
But like, couldn't we tell the EL, this is the current blob count that has been voted by all the validators, same way we do for gas limit today, and then it just uses that value.
Your mic is very bad, Nishan.
Did you hear it? No or no?
Still shaking.
Okay,
Sorry,
let me try.
could you repeat that, Nishant? I didn't hear you really well.
Okay, let me try again. So right now for transactions, what happens is that we tell the EL that this is the gas limit that has been voted by the validator, and if there's agreement, we would bump up the gas limit. So could we do something like that for the blob count?
Does the CL actually tell the EL what the gas limit is today? I don't think. I mean, okay.
Are there any EL devs here? Maybe they could chime in.
So we don't basically, CL does not send any blob gas parameters in the FCU, but I think this is a change that has been proposed as well, that the CL should send it so that EL doesn't need to hard fork each time when CL wants to raise the limit. So it probably makes sense, and maybe we should include it in the Electra itself, that CL will send like how max gas limit is sent, max blob gas limit will be sent, and on the basis of that, basically EL should be able to produce the block.
So Dankrad and Ansgar were thinking about this, and I think they wanted to propose it, and they probably are way ahead in their thought process at this point. But when we spoke about it, the issue was that it breaks sync on the EL side, because the EL would then be syncing an old block and not know how many blobs it was supposed to have. So it wouldn't be able to validate if it estimated gas properly. So you would then have to somehow add it in the header or add it in the block body, and that would be more changes that need to happen. It is.
You need to add in the header. I mean, it couldn't just be part of the max limit, right? So EL should just check max limit of the gas, or
I mean,
we don't actually need to check. I don't see the
max limit. It still needs to know, right? If the CL decides what the max limit is and the EL doesn't know.
No, the max limit is our max commitment limit, which is 4096.
Yeah, okay, then you change the paradigm to some sort of optimistic method where it just checks that it is something below 4096, but it doesn't know the exact value.
How does it, how is it different from checking against, let's say, 6 for now, right? It doesn't actually matter. Once they have the state on which they can execute the block, they will come to know. Or basically, since it's basically a optimistic sync, anyway, the parent, so parent is sort of validated in terms of hash, right? Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I had an initial convo with Marek about it, and I think the problem is that if you just knew it had to be some value below 4096, then I could get a block and I have to sort of verify it, and all I can verify that the gas is right, assuming it's below 4096, which is different from how it works today. Because today I know that the max is 6, so if I get a block with 7 blobs in it, I know it's wrong.
But you verify against the transactions version hashes, right? So it's not just the number of blocks or blob gas it used says in the header, and we have that in the header, right? Blob gas used, so that is already there.
Yeah, fair enough.
Why can't the CL just let the EL know in an engine API call? what the target and the
This is
That's
for
exactly what we're discussing. And that's the fact that it would break sync, or you would have to think about sync on the EL.
I mean, the problem is what Pari is mentioning is on the optimistic sync, when you basically get an FCU and then you sync back the chain, and then you want to validate the data that you are getting in that chain for which you have not received any FCU. And anyway, the parameter that the CL will be sending to EL will be in the block production FCU, not the normal FCU that it would send on the block import.
Yeah, and then the FCU triggers snap sync. And I think the issue then is that snap sync needs to take this into account, right?
SnapSync doesn't sync any blobs, right? SnapSync
Not
only
really.
straight.
But yeah, but I would need to import the block to validate if it was valid or not. And if
You don't validate the blob at all. When, for example, you get a block and in a normal in a normal scenario, when you get a block and you send it over to the EL, you are not sending them the blobs. You are sending them the transactions which has version hashes, which is basically used to validate the blob gas. So actually, blobs are not synced by the EL once they are produced.
Yeah, that's fair. I'll try and get the argument we had, and I can send it to you. But yeah, there was definitely something gas that
discussion on this. Yeah, you can start a thread on all code as, and we can talk about it.
Yeah, because I think Marek's preferred approach was to, for example, treat it like a difficulty bomb change if you want to simplify it, or add it to the headers. Like one of the two approaches was his preferred option.
It's not really required to make it more complex. No, I don't see the reason why we can't just have this upper limit and trust the data that is in the headers. Because if you, for example, get an FCU from the CL and you have to sync back the optimistic sync, through optimistic sync, all the entire chain that you are downloading is valid because it is the parent-child relationship that you are downloading and not downloading anything else. So if you are, for example, basing your canonicality on the basis of the block hash that you got in FCU, then all of the ancestral chain is sort of validated.
Yeah, fair enough. I think Dankrad's also here, so I can just ask him if he wants to post stuff or just in general bring it up.
Do we actually want to change this for Spectra, by the way? 3 and 6.
So I would support basically CL FCUing the max blob gas for the block production.
And then max blobs per block would become a config variable instead of a preset.
So max blobs per block for the EL would then shift to 4096 gas. So they have max gas, max blob gas parameter, which would basically now correspond to 4096 times blob gas parameter. So they would shift they would configure that parameter to the new one, and then the CL configuration can happen on the basis of whatever we decide, whether we want it to be basically a time-based rollout or increase of the gas or of the max blobs, or through a hard fork or soft fork kind of scenario. I mean, that all that is fine. Just to echo the discussion that is going on in the chat, yes, I think we should do it in Spectra and not bump up the blob count from the CL side as well.
Regarding the what was the consensus on EIP 7594 fork version, fork epoch naming scheme? So how do we want to trigger PeerDAS actually? I saw some pushback for actually using it as a fork and some pushback against doing it as a fork.
I am pro having it with a hard fork because easier and more clear. Just my opinion.
I also favor it as having the hard fork because then the typing of the data that is referred in the code everywhere is sort of more clear and more easy and less messy. And I think the boilerplate code that would be required to add a new hard fork, if it's not minimal, it must actually be fixed across all the clients. So this is my opinion that it is cut and dry and should be just be a hard fork. But if teams choose it to be some peer activation epoch, obviously we'll make that happen as well.
Just a quick clarification. When you guys mean hard fork, do you mean a PeerDAS specific fork, or do you want to just activate it on Pectra?
Post Spectra fork on top of, so it could, so as a hard fork, as a sort of which has basically its own fork version and fork epoch, but scheduled after Pectra.
I think after Petra is going to be confusing. Maybe it makes sense to do Deneb plus PeerDAS. I'm mainly making the argument because there's 3 streams and we haven't still decided what Pectra is. So EOF is also having a similar discussion right now on how they should activate it. If you decide that PeerDAS needs to be activated on Pectra, as well as EOF needs to be activated on Pectra, and we don't know what Pectra is, I'm sorry, but that's going to be an insanely huge cluster of mess that no one's going to be able to untangle. It would be easier if all 3 start with Deneb as the base, and then we do essentially 3 forks, and then we can have 3 different lines, and whenever we decide what's going into Pectra finally, we can merge stuff through. And that was kind of the advantage of having the Pectra for activation epoch approach.
But
so
activation epoch,
you mean for the DevNet, or you mean when it will be activated in mainnet?
Right now, I'm meaning for DevNets, but yeah, I have no particular thought on how it would be for later.
I think I'm okay with that DevNet approach, and mainnet will anyway come to decide when. We'll see what is ready at what timeline. But yeah, so if it's as a fork happening, then basically we'll obviously decide whether Pectra comes before or whether PeerDAS come before. But I'm fine either way.
We mix everything all together all the time. But I think the top priority is to figure out if we need to bump the blob count and the PeerDAS upgrade all together. In that case, we need a hard fork for also to clean the EL part as well in the same upgrades. And including into Pectra is another topic here. I think it depends on the timeline, and I'm fine with whatever for the DevNet, but just for the mainnet hard fork, I think it makes more sense to combine them together. And sorry to try to stop here because we still have many things on the agenda, so I want to speed up a bit. And so what's the action here? we want to use the activation epoch for the DevNet?
I think different teams have different opinions on this.
Yeah, I think that's part of the problem.
Yeah.
The argument keeps coming up, and then we're always just moving between the two slides, but not making a decision.
Yes. Oh.
Deplion is now here.
For the DevNets, can we just continue doing what we did for DevNet 0? I mean, just have it as a fork or has Lighthouse already moved to the new mechanism?
For DevNet 0, we kept the same fork version as Deneb, and then we had we had a fork epoch which activated Petra, which in effect is Petra activation epoch.
No, he's talking about PeerDAS, and PeerDAS activation was the EIP 7594 fork version and fork epoch that we activated at like epoch 1 or 2 or whatever it was. And we didn't activate Petra at all.
Yeah, sorry, I was talking about PeerDAS, not Petra.
So is the question, do we want to have PeerDAS DevNet combine it with Petra or not, or separate DevNet?
I would keep it separate for now because Petra and PeerDAS just have completely different teams working on it. And if we combine everything right now, we'll be blocked by other teams who haven't finished their stuff.
Sounds good.
But
So
then
I
the
would-
idea is to keep everything the same. So we would have still EIP 7594 fork version and fork epoch. Keep it as a hard fork, and let's leave everything as DevNet 0 and just try to do DevNet 1. And once DevNet 1 or DevNet whatever is stable, then we can come back to this and decide how we actually want to activate it.
Sounds good to me. At least we can keep moving and test. Oh, good. Okay, I see some laughs in the chat. And okay, thank you. So somehow we only have 10 minutes left for all this spec discussions. So I think it would give some time for the PR author to give a quick recap of all the PRs that we listed, stuff from Trapa.
Okay, so quickly the PR, which is the second in the list, is clarification of samplings and everything around sampling. So it's splitting the description into sample selection and sample query, and then the descriptions for both. And it contains a bunch of clarifications of how it is recommended to randomize, and also a function to have the to how you can get more samples and allow for some losses, so what we call lossless DAS. I had a bunch of comments, most resolved. I still have a few from pop, which are not resolved. One is just function naming and whether the constants are going to the parameter or just used internally. I'm just waiting for pop on that to be happy with the solution, I hope, and others. And the other one is more on a theoretical point. I was recommending sample selection without replacement because it's just easy to implement and just gives better performances. So if you just go and implement the spec, you get the better behavior. But we had a small discussion on that, and yeah, I'm just waiting for Pop to agree or disagree with my last point.
Yeah, I think the function signature, like the parameter of the function, I think is good already. Yeah.
Okay.
I agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah, on the other one, you might need time so that others want to chip in. It's really just so I'm recommending when I'm describing what's the random selection, which is good to describe something in the specification so that if you implement the specification without thinking too much, you implement the right thing. I'm recommending uniform random selection without replacement as a recommendation. So if you have reasons to implement something else, you can implement something else. Yeah, I think it's not a big deal, but Bob was saying maybe I should not recommend the without replacement part.
Yeah, I also think it's not a big deal. Like, yeah, I think it's not a big deal. Like, I just like my first thought is like, I just don't understand why selection without replacement is like more preferable or like more recommended. Like, I don't see much difference, and that's all. But I don't have strong preference. Like, yeah, it's okay if it's okay for me to put the recommendation in the spec.
Yeah, it's just so you have to choose something, either this or that, and slightly better the without replacement. So if you just implement the spec, you implement that, and then you get slightly better performance. That's the only reasoning there.
I think to be honest, I think selection with replacement, I think is, in my opinion, is a lot easier to implement. You just select the column like from the same set like every time. So if you do select the column without replacement, right, you have to remember what you have chosen, and I think it's like it's harder to implement. But I think the one with replacement is simpler, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean it's slightly simple, but the difference is small. It's typically a primitive in the libraries, or you just remember and cross it out, or you do a permutation. Yeah, so you can implement it easily. Anyway, I was putting it as a recommendation, so it's, you know, it just means that you can just forget it and do the other thing. I just wanted to specify it. It does give better probability, sometimes slightly, sometimes slightly more. It actually starts to matter when you are doing the incremental stuff, but that's not something I want to describe in the specification because that's more like a client strategy. Yeah, but I don't want to steal all the 10 minutes. so we can continue it on the PR.
Yeah, thank you, Trevor. Next, Francesco would like to talk about the folk choice PR.
Hi, yeah, so there's this PR that I just linked, which does a few things. I mean, most of it, or like some of it is just the parameter changes that we sort of agreed on at the interop. I know like it wasn't, you know, exactly agreed that we would do 128, but that's, I mean, up for discussion whether we want to do that instead of 64. I guess some people had the feeling that it makes sense to maybe try that out and see. I don't know if there's any reason not to do it, because if we can do it, then we do get some kind of well, we do get basically like a 2x better kind of efficiency. And yeah, the other thing is validator custody. There was some discussion with Justin around like how exactly that should work. And I think this is still, I don't know. I think there's more to say about this. There's questions around like I think particularly Ansgar, even though he didn't comment on the PR, but we've had some discussions and about if there's ways to introduce this assignment, basically really being like in protocol, kind of like a public assignment, so that there's some degree of accountability, and whether or not it's possible to do this in a way that doesn't really conflict with anonymity questions. And so yeah, I think there's more to say about that, but I guess yeah, the general, we still wanted to like introduce the general concept of validator custody, because we do think that, or at least I think that it's it really de-risks the whole transition to PeerDAS and just like really, lets us use the fact that we don't actually have just a million validators, but like some concentration of stake. And then there's the fork choice part, which it's a few things. Like one is basically changing the way that on block that the availability checks work in on block in the spec, which is the block importing part. Basically right now, the way that part works is that you just don't import something that is unavailable. Whereas here, like the only check that you would do there is after justification. So you only wouldn't import things that would justify an unavailable block. And their unavailability is basically, determining whether or not something is unavailable there would just be through peer sampling. Otherwise, the kind of normal the live, let's say, availability check is just a custody check. So you wouldn't do peer sampling. Yeah, again, this is another thing that I think we talked about this at the interop, like it makes everything kind of simpler and more robust and lets us like delay by a lot the usage of peer sampling. And I mean, another small thing is like in the in the fork choice filtering part where you normally would just use custody, you also would use peer sampling, but only if something is from more than an epoch ago. And so again, it's like quite loose, like you should have plenty of time to be able to do peer sampling. And I mean, if something, if you really cannot satisfy peer sampling after a whole epoch of trying, then it seems like there's good reason probably not to follow that branch. I guess, yeah, if anyone has questions about that, there's linked a couple of documents. That one is like kind of summarizing what we talked about at the interop and why certain things may make sense to do, which is a lot of what it's in the PR. And then, yeah, the other document is more specifically about the fork choice part. Yeah, if anyone has questions, we can talk about that. But before that, one last thing was basically there was at some point the idea of trying to move to a fork choice, which is like block slot or some other thing, which essentially would make it so that when people don't vote for a block, then the block is kind of discarded from the fork choice, like that you can essentially have the empty slot kind of win. And this makes certain attacks a bit, basically, yeah, it deals with certain reorg attacks a bit more easily. But I think that it's probably not worth the complexity in practice to do this right now. I think basically these attacks are not that much different from a proposer DOS kind of situation that we already have today. Like in theory, this could happen, and we kind of rely on well, two things. Like one is just proposers, like at least like bigger proposers protecting themselves, and then also in principle, if it really became a problem, we could have measures in place. And yeah, here it would even be simpler than what we would do with proposer DOS. Like we don't need the whole SSLE machinery. We could do this fork choice change, which is much smaller. And so yeah, I think basically I would tend to leave things as they are from that perspective, and kind of don't embark on this complexity of trying to change the fork choice in that way and try to have a backup scheme and things like that. But yeah, open to, I mean, I'm not sure if this is like something that people have opinions about, because it is a bit deep in the whole realm of fork choice attacks, but it's not that complicated. So if you do have time, I think it would be nice for other people to try to like familiarize themselves a bit with this specific attack vector and like, try to have an opinion on whether or not you think it's okay to just do nothing. Because yeah, I think that's my preference now, but like it would be good to have more confirmation on like what we think about this. And again, this is discussed in the PR and in the docs. Yeah, now if you have any questions or whatever, let's open up the floor.
Thank you, Francesco. The next is Manu and the ENR record PR. Just quick note, I think that's ready, and just want to see if any objection. If not, then I will go merge it. Yeah, many.
Yep. So on PeerDAS, we introduce a new field in the Ethereum node record. This field is named custodying subnet counts, and this is the key, and the value is SSZ uint64. As you may know, there is a 300 bytes maximum for the Ethereum node record. And so what I propose to do is just to reduce the key from custodying subnet count to CSC, which saves 19 bytes, and to move from, for the value, to move from the SSZ uint64 to just a big Indian integer, which can save, if we use strictly less than 128 subnet count 7 bytes. And yes, I think we will use 128 subnets, so we will save 6 bytes. So in total, we could save 25 bytes. And about the big integer, is just using the same things than we have today with the UDP port of the TCP port, for example. Because yes, right now there is not at all SSD encoded stuff in the ENR. And by the way, ENR is already RLP encoded, so there is really no reason to both encode with RLP and with SSD. That's pretty it. And so in total, we save about 8% of the maximum size of the node record. That's all.
Thank you. And the next is POP and the passive sampling PR. Would you like to give an update?
Yeah. I noticed that when you do sampling, right? I think we don't usually know like when to sample. Like we usually know like, because if we sample like too early, we will not get a sample, right? If we sample like too late, we like lose some time, like waste some time. So I think I think I have an idea of like something called passive sampling. Like instead of just using the request response to get the sample, you just join the subnet, like just a moment before the slot, and then you just passively receive the sample. Yeah. So by doing this, you get the samples as soon as possible. Yeah. It's like yeah, that's it. That's called passive sampling.
Is this the same as introducing the new control message, observe, in Gossip Sub?
Yeah, actually, yeah, I think actually you can do passive sampling without the topic observation. That is an upgrade to the Gossip Sub that I just proposed. Like it's just a different story, but with the topic of observation, you can do passive sampling even better, like in terms of the bandwidth consumption. Like what you can do is just like, instead of joining the subnet like directly, you just observe the topic, because when you observe the topic, you get only the message ID of the message instead of the actual message. So you will get notified when there is a new message, but you don't actually have to download the actual message. So that is a benefit of topic observation.
So yeah, from my point of view, I think that there's 3 different ways of interaction possible here. And then you can try to implement them as part of Gossip Sub or as part of the request response. So the first one is I ask for the column, and you give it if you have it. You tell me you don't have it if you don't have it. The second one is I ask for the column. I tell you that I'm interested in the column, and then after some time when you get it, you send it. And the third one is what you say here, I think, which is I tell you that I'm interested. When you have it, you tell me that you have it. And then I tell you, okay, now give it to me. And then you give it. That is 3 different ways of getting a column at the end of the day. And we are a bit jumping back and forth between these three ways of doing it. And then we are also discussing a little bit what kind of networking primitives to use a new P2P gossip sub primitive, which is the observe, or to use a request response interpreted as, well, once you have it, send it to me. Honestly, I don't know which one is the better, and I think it also depends on the sizes of the columns, which one is better or worse.
I think like the second option, the send the column to me when you have it, is, I think, is actually joining the subnet, right? It's like, how is it different from joining the subnet? Like, because when you join the subnet, you actually tell your peers that, okay, when you have the message, you just send me the message, right? It's like, I think that is actually the subnet subscription.
Yeah, the joining the subnet comes with a bunch of limitations, like the mesh degree and so on and so forth. So that's why it's kind of similar from the message point of view, but then you have lots of side effects there. So that's why one way is to use the request response, and I send you the request, and the semantics of that is send it when you have it, and then freeing yourself from the gossip sub considerations. But I agree it can be mapped to the gossip sub if you modify the gossip sub interpretation. It's just, I don't know which one networking primitive is the best, and I don't know which one interaction is the best. I'm just trying to read about the options.
If you do use it as part of gossip sub, there are a few issues because from what I understood in the PR, you'd be using a different mesh size than what we have now. So there is no way to like differentiate a normal peer that's going to forward the message was this special peer that's just trying to observe the message.
Yeah, so you would need to modify gossip sub to put this differentiation into it, basically, I think.
Yeah, that'd be pretty non-trivial from what I've seen.
Okay, guys, we a bit exceed of the meeting time. Before we wrap up this call, could we go through what are the to-do actions, or like any very important thing that we should discuss today instead of the Thursday call? By Thursday, I mean the ACDC. No? Okay, so I think we could definitely talk about the block max configuration and setting in, and how it's in the EL the Thursday code. That could be a good topic to be there. And the second action this year is to go through the current preset and configuration files to check if anything that should be on in the configuration or another side. And anything else? And I make a small poll in the chat to see if people want to make it a weekly call or bi-weekly. And so far we get more votes on the weekly. I think it's because it's the first call and we have too many things to discuss and running out of time. So okay, more votes are coming. More votes are coming. Okay, interesting. So, Jimmy, please.
Hey, yeah, I actually want to talk about like maybe we can talk about this async, but on Discord we've started having a conversation on what we can do for the proposals that are doing local block building. because like if we move to PeerDAS and if we increase the blob count, then it's going to significantly increase the upload when the proposer propose a block, and if they use local block building, then that means they will need to have like 32 to 64 megabytes of upload in one go. So I think we talked about approaches to how we can like maintain home stakers feasibility. So maybe we can just continue this discussion async, or unless if anyone want to talk about this now.
Like, is the argument that it's unfeasible right now or in the future?
It's unfeasible if we increase the blob count to, I mean, at the moment, I think with the current block size is okay, but if we try to increase it to like something like 32 megabytes, or I don't think it has to be 32, but once you increase the blob count, it will basically make it like hard for home stakers to publish the block and blobs timely. And I think there's proposals on allowing a CL flag for the validator to provide a max blob count on like what they can handle. But I feel like this might actually limit our scaling. So it'd be good if we can find alternative approaches.
So from the networking point of view, we had several writing on the discussion. In our simulators, since quite a long time, we are using a modification to Gossip Sub in which we are sending out the data in a way that we are starting by sending out one copy of everything first. And that reduces, that means that you don't have to necessarily count with the Gossip Sub multiplier. It can still be quite some data to send out a full block or an extended block. But at least you don't have to count with an 8 times multiplier on the bandwidth requirement. And I was promising to have a write-up on that, which I don't have yet. But it's something we have used in our simulators since last year.
Kev, do you want to talk about the idea you mentioned in the chat?
Yeah, it was just that we could send it to relayers who are probably already doing it already for block builders or altruistic nodes, like maybe the super nodes that we have in the network, who will just propagate the blobs.
But would you need to statically pair with those nodes? Because how would you know, right, that these guys would send the whole block out?
Yeah, they might have to have like a flag that says, you know, I have a lot of bandwidth or something like this. I don't know how we're going to identify supernodes on the network either way. I think they just look like regular nodes.
We could, because if we know their custody count, we can figure out that they'll be hosting a lot of data.
Right. Yeah, so that's sort of one possible mitigation for this.
But that means if we have 32 blobs, we'll still have to send out like how many, like 8 megabytes of blobs to that supernodes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so there was, remember in that proposal there was one proposal not to need to send out, which is building the block also in other places, kind of distributed building. But otherwise you have to send out at least one copy of everything. And We can try to identify places which are kind of superseders in the network, so that you just send one copy to them and then they are spreading it all around. I'm not sure that that's the most reliable solution. So having all these kind of network optimizations in also come with their risks, and I'm just not sure that's the right choice, but it can be done. Like send a first copy to someone like that, and then if you have to send out a second copy, then send it randomly. You can have these kind of mechanisms. So we are mostly looking at the 2D case, and the 2D case, the other code is very good in you are just sending out one piece of random copies, and even if things are lost, things are also recovered very well. With the on-the-fly reconstruction that we have in the 1D case, so in here in PeerDAS, if things are not going out because you only have the bandwidth to send out one copy and then they are stalling, then things will be stalling until there is a node which can reconstruct and then seed other topics.
And the issue is the timing, right? Like if local block builders, if they had like 10 seconds to send out all of the blobs, that would it would no longer be an issue? Or is the issue just the total number of bytes that need to be sent out regardless?
So the issue is, so with normal gossip behavior, you typically start sending out, and then you are sending it to 8 copies of the first column, and then 8 copies of the second column. So you end up doing an uneven sending out if you don't have enough bandwidth. So the thing starts from if you don't have enough bandwidth to send it out in time, then you will have this ordering in what you are sending out, because you are sending out to 8 nodes one piece, and you are sending out another piece to no nodes. So the another column, the columns are not treated equal in that sense, and just balancing that so that you are putting nodes in the network in the position of doing the recovery faster in the timeline, basically. So that's what you achieve by sending out one copy of everything first. Each column you are sending out one copy. So the amount of data that you are sending out is basically twice the block size. Then depending on your bandwidth, that means something, depending on how many megabytes and how many megabytes per second you have uplink. You took a few seconds to send that out, but at least you are not taking 8 times more to arrive to a position where nodes can start reconstruction if problems happen. So the problematic way would be I send out the first column, 8 copies of that, and I'm queuing up the second column to others, and I'm queuing up the third column, and it gives an ordering to the columns. So that's why ideally you are spreading where you send, and you are making sure the first copy is going out of everything relatively early, so that the network can do its job. I mean, the peer-to-peer distribution can do its job on every single column.
Okay, thanks, Jimmy. Thanks, Jabba. Thanks, Ted. Do we have any final points before we close today? Thank you so much. Oh,
So I say,
just go ahead.
That I started a PR on the reconstruction and on the cross seeding, So it's related to, I think, what Nishant is already implementing and what had been discussed in the interop. I was trying to write down spec for that, but I'm not sure it's already major. I think it's a first version. For the next call.
Thanks. Right. So I think we will for the PeerDAS it's in a highly iteration stage. So I think we would merge PRs more faster than the Pectra contents. So I hope the clients can also help signal like which PRs that you think we should include and which shouldn't on the GitHub. Otherwise, I know like Java opened the PRs for a long time and but we would still don't have that competency to merge it as soon as possible. So just hope to see more, sum ups, approvals, sum down on the PRs. And any other things for the code today? So I went back to see the vote. So it turns out we still get more votes of the bi-weekly code. So the next code will likely be scheduled on the 25th, June 25th. Okay, so let's talk about it on Thursday and 2 weeks later. Thank you. The video will be published on Discord. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.